to know. I mean, I've made that mistake before. Like people give me swag and I end up like showing the wrong thing. But this is from a customer. It's the best hot drink container I've ever had in my entire life. Keeps the coffee warm for like hours. It's crazy. I do recommend it. Anyway, welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on Air. I'm bringing it to you. It is another midweek special, folks. And it's been my pleasure to be running this series with our good friends at Olio, because it's given us an opportunity to really explore some topics that are really closely aligned to the values of the company, but also I think very important for the industry at large. And today we're going to be talking about responsible AI. I mean, hands up, who's heard the term responsible AI? I think all of us in the industry probably have. But what does it mean for recruiters at desk? How does it translate to you as an active recruiter doing the job of recruiting? And you're told you've got to operate under a framework of responsible AI. What does it mean exactly? And today we're going to try and tease out some of those things. Define responsible AI as best as we can. And we've got a bunch of amazing experts to help join us for that. But also try and translate it into what it means for recruiters who have a job to do, and you know, what are the practical steps that we need to do to take it to that point. Anyway, I'm here with my good friend and co-host Tommy Lai, who I complimented him earlier. He's stepped up his sartorial standards, blowing me out of the water with that wonderful polka dot type of shirt. Tommy, great to see you, mate.
Yeah, thank you, Hung. So great to be here. Delighted to join. Just want to share a quick kind of few thoughts from me. So just to explain to everyone, you know, what I do. So I'm the marketing director at Olio, and my focus is really about demystifying the black box of AI for the recruitment community. And we know there's a lot of noise and a fair bit of anxiety around AI right now, and especially right now. That's why, you know, recently we commissioned our report setting the standard for responsible AI. We wanted to move past the buzzwords and look at how this tech actually impacts people. And so Olio builds human-centric tools that handle heavy lifting like screening and skills assessments. But our North Star is always, and has always been, about fairness and transparency. And our view is that AI should be a recruiter's co-pilot, not the pilot. So it's all about using intelligent automation to eliminate bias, informing and freeing up recruiters to do what they do best, building human connections.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And Olio actually have, and that kind of is reflected in many respects in the key segments that Olio have had great success, isn't it? It is with certain sort of environments that have a very heightened requirement for high ethics and compliance and so on. So can you tell us a little bit about the sort of industry or sort of industry sectors that Olio have had success in?
Yeah, you're right. We work in a lot of highly compliance process-centric industries. So, for example, financial services, central government, local government, also in policing and in healthcare. So, yeah, we do a lot of work in there where process, compliance, you know, meeting high standards, ethics, etc., are absolutely critical and legal requirements for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. I've just shared what looks like a horribly long UTM. I do beg your pardon. Yeah, you can clip that off, guys, if you don't want to click on it. But basically, this is the report, the standard for responsible AI guide for modern recruiters. That was put together by Madeline Lorano, obviously industry well-renowned expert on the case. And she did some amazing work for the company as a third party to pull together all of this information, a combination of quantitative and qualitative work, really worth having a dive into. So that's free to download. Go ahead and give it a shot if you haven't already seen a copy of it. Okay, cool. Let's get on with the show. I'm going to need sound check, so hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Folks, if you're watching this on Crowdcast, can you see and hear myself and Tommy okay? Let me know in the chat. We should be broadcasting this live in a number of LinkedIns as well. So if you're watching this on LinkedIn as well, do let me know in the comments whether the audio and visual is okay. I think so. It looks like I'm live on LinkedIn. And yeah, just let me know, folks. Even though I do say that, I keep saying this, but there's probably not much I can do about it if you can't hear me well. Anyway, okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mitchell. Everyone can hear us okay. Okay, let's get on with this, Tommy. I guess we should just bring on our guest. But before we do that, I wonder. Let's give it a layman's perspective. I hope you don't mind me calling you a layman, Tommy. But your expertise, obviously, marketing. I'm obviously doing a lot of media stuff. We're not experts necessarily in putting together policy or documents. How do you understand responsible AI? I mean, how would you summarize it? Is it possible for you to give us a definition?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, in simple terms, I would say this, and this is how I probably would describe it to my children who are, teenagers today. So, AI would be a technology that's rooted in fairness and transparency and its compliance, but ultimately there to support humans making the decision and not replacing it. But ultimately, it's about a glass box type approach, not a black box. Don't be opaque and just try to show how decisions are made. Um, that's how I would probably go about it.
Brilliant. I love the black box, box analogy. I've never heard anybody say that. I'm pretty certain you didn't come up with it, Tommy, but I'm going to give you the credit for it because I think it's ideal. A lot of AI, by the way, if you're using ChatGPT, Anthropic, or whatever, Claude or whatnot, it is black box. Like you have no clue how it's going to generate or the results it does give you. There's no information on this. And the future that we've got to do when we're operating and using tools for professional purposes, particularly when we're hiring people, which according to the EU AI Act is one of the higher risks applications of AI. We have to kind of have an explainable and transparent way. So that is clear. And also, I love the concept of kind of human primacy. The human being cannot be underneath the decision-making process of AI. It's got to be human judgment at the top, even though we may not be fully prepared to understand what the implications of that. But I think that's a maturity thing we'll get through to. Anyway, let's bring on our guests. They may know more, may know less, who knows? We'll bring them on and we'll see. So Martin, I've just given you an invite there. We also need to see Megan. Let's bring Megan on. I do believe Chloe's here. Yeah, Chloe's here as well. Let's bring Chloe on as well. And we'll get on with the show. By the way, folks, there is a poll on the right-hand side of your screen. I want you to give this a go. The question is quite simple. Does your company have an AI governance document? It's a simple, actually, it's not a simple yes, no, because there's a couple of additional things here. There's a yes, there's a no, but in planning, and there's a no, not at all, and then there's a don't know, which I think is totally legitimate as well, and there's also an other as well, if in case you've got something specific you want to say. Okay, we've got some people on screen here. I think everyone more or less is on camera. Meg, you're not. I want to you fiddle with the camera there a little bit, but whilst we have the others, we'll say Martin, Martin, why don't you quickly introduce yourself, sir? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, Martin, not Megan. And also sorry to let the team down when it comes to sartorial excellence. Feel like I'm completely underdressed for this, but yeah, hello. Thanks for having me on, Hung and Tommy. My name's Martin Redstone. My job title is Head of Responsible AI, and I work for a company called Warden AI, which is a product that provides continuous external third-party assurance testing for AI hiring tools.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm going to give Chloe a second to manage the cats there.
Sorry.
But great to see you as well, Chloe. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
So I'm Chloe. I'm a program manager for recruiting operations at Datadog. And at the moment, I'm embedding with our security team. So I'm learning all about AI from a security standpoint, and it is scary.
Yeah, fantastic. And by the way, Datadog have obviously, I would say, probably a very explicit target for cybersecurity risk and all the rest of it. Chloe and her security team have put together some really quite amazing kind of security measures, which are accessible and published, I think. So well worth diving in to have a look at how kind of a company that is fully exposed to some of the risks of sort of in this AI-enabled world to check out how they're doing it. Megan, I wonder whether we could do the classic kind of refresh the browser on this. That can sometimes work. I think Tommy had the similar problem last time. So give that a shot and see whether we can come back. She can hear me, I think. So that's all good. Okay. Let's go with you, Martin, on this. We tried to define responsible AI. What was how would you grade Tommy's effort? Was it all right?
Oh yeah, absolutely superb. I'm a big fan talking about kind of black box versus glass box. I think that's super important. And quite right around the kind of humanity side of things. I think that for me, responsible AI is. I like to kind of simplify the definition, but it's having humility to test our own assumptions. We talk about how, don't worry, this is bias free. Don't worry, this is ethical. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. And we're getting to that stage where we have to worry and we have to kind of test those assumptions, and that's through building continuous feedback loops. Is it doing what we think it's doing? Is it doing it continuously? Audit trails, do we know what decisions were made and when they were made? And really just doing that continuously. For me, that's the foundations, the central point of responsible AI, and that absolutely goes hand in hand with everything that Tommy was saying.
Yeah, I love that, Martin. The sense of humility. So I guess one of the, I wouldn't say a red flag, it's pretty harsh, but at least a pink flag is if you have a vendor that's banging on about them being completely bulletproof and saying, look, this is absolutely guaranteed, this, that, and the other. You've got to think, actually, maybe there isn't such a scenario that's possible. Because if you think about how AI, or at least the LLMs have been put together, there is no neutral LLM. It's a cultural product. It's embedded with human values, and there's going to be bias in that. Whichever way or direction those things are going to be influenced. So there's no such thing as I think we're having this conversation in a private group about what is ethical LLM. Maybe there isn't a hierarchy. Maybe there is a hierarchy there, but there isn't an absolute case where that's pristine and completely clean, and everything else is dirty.
It's exactly like you said, earlier on, is that an LLM is a pure black box. Nobody knows exactly how decisions are made. There are challenges with inference loads on servers. There are challenges with pre-prompting and re-prompting and all those kind of things. And like you said, training data, where has that data come from, etc. So there is no such thing as a glass box LLM, and the excuse of here's how we prompted it, that's not glass box, because you still don't know how that instruction is being manipulated through the system. So absolutely no such thing. No such thing.
Yeah, so a little bit of what maybe this is something our vendors need to also join in with the kind of conversation to say, actually, let's agree that no one is bulletproof. The marketing temptation is to say this, but the sense that actually you're working on it, it's a live thing, you're constantly improving and iterating. This is the way we've got to do it. Okay, Chloe, we're just going to go with it. Who's joining you, by the way? Well, what's this? You need
this
an
is Ariel, my talking cat, and she's just being very chatty this morning.
No worries. We love the authenticity of this. We know this is not digitally deep faked in any way. Chloe, give us your view. Responsible AI. How does it look within an organization that takes AI and security and responsible AI very seriously?
Well, I can't really talk for my whole organization. Like, I can talk for my team and like the recruiting team, I suppose, at Datadog, and like how I approach responsible AI. Like myself, I approach it, from, I suppose, data protection and a security perspective. And data protection is something where I have actually experienced candidate coming and being like, hey, I don't want my data to be processed by an AI, right? So what do we do when that happens? Like, our tools right now are not set up to enable the opt-out. And I'm having GDPR flashback from 2018, where all the tools were, slapping on like a layer of GDPR compliance. And it really feels like that right now. So that's my first approach. And the second approach is we're all vibe coding like nifty little tools and little stuff. And we're just going to vibe code a massive security breach into our candidates' data, because when we work in recruitment, we have access to so many personal information. Like aside from the HRIS, we probably have the most amount of personal data in any company. And if we vibe code a nifty little tool that's going to help us day to day, but that creates a massive hole into our ATS, then what happens next?
It's a very interesting sort of sideline, isn't it? I don't know whether you caught that show we had with Tristan McCrory, and he was saying, yeah, we have a team that does the vibe coding apps, and he's producing little apps, and I'm thinking that's great, but there's an additional kind of attack vector there, isn't there? There's a vulnerability with doing this, and I'm sure Tristan's got it all sorted because he's thinking about this. But one of the things that you want to do is to empower your team to produce these useful apps, but also maybe isolate those apps in certain ways, such that it doesn't put your company at risk. Megan, thanks so much for battling away with the computer, swapping computers, hot swapping the computers out as well to get us on screen, which is brilliant. Great to see you. Why don't you quickly introduce yourself, Meg? Who are you and what it is you do?
Fantastic. So happy to be here. It's been way too long. My name is Megan Marie Butler. I've been in the AI space. I think we've all been in that space together for a bit too long, and it just ages us when we talk about that. And I've in that time, I've almost completed my PhD. Sadly, I can't say I've finished it yet. I'm not Dr. Megan, but I'm writing my thesis. Yeah. So if you really want to talk some deep theory or anything like that, I'm always happy to do that. I'm stuck in the thick of things, spending weekends working away on it. And during the week, I've now progressed my career. I'm the UK AI workforce lead for KPMG. So we're in such a unique position right now. Not only is my team using AI to help us do our work, deliver our work, and help us develop our products, but we're also developing a product that uses agents, and we help organizations understand where those potential applications are within their organization and the impact it's going to have on their workforce. So it's a really unique space to be in, but I start to realize that my life is pretty much literally 24/7 AI. I never escape from it, yet I don't have a scheduling agent yet, and I don't have an agent that organizes my emails really well for me yet. So it's overwhelming, and you see, and I think amazing to see too how much the market's moved on in this time, near decade now, and what's happening, but also concerning to hear the conversations that we're having around ethical AI. It hasn't really changed all that much either in a lot of ways, which is really interesting.
Yeah, it has. And we might as well dive into sort of the topic du jour. I mean, Martin and I are going to be having a chat with this later on today about the case that's been brought against Afold, class action suit. I think that was big news a couple of maybe just a week or so ago. And you know what? A great deal of it seems to be just the old school, like, data privacy, isn't it? I mean, it basically it reads to me that it may not even be an AI issue. It's like the company is being accused of just using data without consent or without asking for it, and that's the basis of the case. And if you think about AI generally, it's basically everyone, right? It's basically everyone. So the sort of the AI wave basically has crashed through some of the old privacy stuff that essentially didn't provide any type of security for the people's data. What does this mean, though, guys? I mean, is it a proof, for instance, that the regulation is kind of obsolescent in the sense that, we need to change the regs, so to say, rather than change the technology pathway? What's our thoughts on that? Martin, go to you first.
Yeah, it's a great question, and without spoiling everything we're talking about later, you're spot on around, ultimately it's a data issue rather than an AI issue, but everything to do with AI starts with data. And I think that's the important thing that we seem to forget about. And I've spoken so many times about this kind of cognitive reset that we've had in the world of data protection. And everybody's so fascinated with the magic of large language models. They seem to be forgetting about the core principles around data, whether that be data accuracy, data protection, where data has come from, all those kind of really core pieces of work. And we have this conversation. It's an incredible conversation that I see popping up time and time again in our industry and further afield, which is, should we get used to the fact that privacy no longer exists in a world of AI? and it just blows my mind, because I think, well, we have a right to privacy, and we have a right to be able to challenge what's happening with our data about us, and whether it's correct and right, and decisions are being made on it, and all those kind of things. So it blows my mind that we're actually asking that question. To your point around regulations, actually, one of the good things about here in the UK, you'll note that there's right now no specific regulation around AI. And that's because we can lean on previous regulations such as GDPR, such as discrimination acts, and all those kind of things. And so actually, when you, again, burrow down into it, the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office here in the UK, are pretty clear that, again, AI regulation is a data regulation issue. And we see that, with regulation coming out all over the world. But actually, going back to the eightfold question, it's testament to the fact that the lawsuit that came out a week and a half ago is based on regulation from the 1970s and not regulation from 1 or 2 years ago. So yeah, lots of interesting thoughts and processes when it comes to regulation and data security. But like I said, blows my mind that we even have to consider whether the age of privacy is over or not.
What are your thoughts on this? We'll go to you, Meg. You've been researching all of this, top to bottom. So, privacy, do we have to give it up? I mean, realistically, do we have to give it up? Because you know what, the common crawl, all of our data is up there. It's not even our data. Arguably, it's never been our data. So if we publish something online, for instance, it's hosted on a website. Is it our data? No, it's the platform's data, right? So I think that's the argument to say, actually, no, you never had your data. It's our data on you. Slightly different. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a deep question, and I'll first, before I dig into that, I want to just add on to Martin's point. I think, on your earlier question on is data the foundation of it, I think it's one of the things that's going to start happening. And these lawsuits, I've always said we're going to find out about regulation through lawsuits. As we see it, we're just going to see more types of lawsuits in these areas. But data is definitely the core of it. And I think we've come through an era where we've done a really good job of digitalizing an analog world that we lived in, and kind of been told to give up our data and our privacy in order to do that. But are we going to come into an era where it's more human, and that we start to recognize the difference between these types of data? That's my hope. The current state of the world. I don't know if that's the direction we're going in, where we're going to go into a more digital world, where more of our lives are going to be expected to be online. And if you're not online, you don't exist. And we saw that happen to businesses with the advent of the internet. That we had a very famous Yellow Book commercial, and I always thought it was really funny because it was the yellow pages, and then they had an advert where it was about a business, and if they weren't online, nobody could see them. They didn't have that visibility. Is that going to happen to us? Is that already happening to us, especially in a recruitment world? If you don't have a good LinkedIn profile, if you're not on GitHub, if you don't have that information out there, are you visible in the world of work if that's where you want to be? And maybe it is, that's the counter movement, is to not be online and to not be in that world. And that's a challenging question. So is it something that we then need to protect more because it is a fact of life that we need to be there, that there needs to be a level of protection? And does GDPR go far enough, or does it go too far? And we're seeing that with the AI regulations now as well. Like, we have Europe, where we're getting very strong regulations and guidance around it, and some could argue a bit too much. And we have other countries like the UK that's saying, in the US, that's kind of going like, let's go all in. There's very little regulations, and it's playing out in really challenging ways. A few weeks ago, there was 2 different rulings that came out, one from a German low court and one from a British high court, on the use of licensed data to train AI models. And so in the German high court, it was copyright infringement. In the UK high court, they decided it wasn't. Both had really interesting arguments. And it's one of those, like, one side of the coin says this and the other side of the coin says that. And it's just different perspectives on the same issue. So is it, the model isn't replicating the data, it isn't storing it, it isn't keeping it, it's just training on the patterns. Is that copyright? According to Germany, it is. According to the UK, it isn't. And we're going to continue to see those challenges. And these are the contested areas, which my research is found to be one of the most interesting places, and one of the areas that we should be focusing on. Like when we think about our innovations and bringing out these technologies, we really need to be thinking about what's going on in those areas. And I think that brings back to that really scary question of like, oh my gosh, is it data? What's going on? I don't know what's happening. It shows the importance of, we don't need to be able to code these programs. But we really need to know how they're working, what type of data it's using, what they're doing to the data, and what do those outputs interpret or help us interpret. And we need to be very conscientious of that. And we've unfortunately lived in an era where statistics and things like that have been, with media and other industries, have been not used as well as they could be. So we tend to have a misperception of them. So we think about things like when we hear about like 95% accuracy, that's 95% of the time it's true, where in reality, in a population of 1,000 and there's 2 diseased, it's a percentage, it's something like 50% or 90% wrong. And it's only 2% correct, or 98% wrong and 2% correct. I'm trying to remember the numbers exactly, but even though it sounds like a really good, accurate test, it's really actually not. And so when we have those types of things and we're using it in things like recruiting, we have to be hyper aware. And we're going, and in these spaces, like as Martin alluded to and talked about earlier as well, is like when we talk about bias, and like we already have bias in the data and how we collect it. We have bias in our societies, so it's being amplified through these processes. And of course, we've kind of heard the stories of that since the early days of AI with things like Amazon. So and they created an algorithm based on a hiring algorithm based around their existing CVs, which ended up being biased. So again, it comes down to a fundamental data problem, but it's also to how do you deal with that. So like it's a huge question. But I think like individually, we need to be really focused in that contested space of not giving up our rights in the data, but also recognizing if we're not in an online environment, we need to be a part of it, but at what boundaries and at what extent do we need to be there? And that's, much bigger than recruitment, and is one of those big societal challenges that we're all facing.
Yeah, it's one of our challenges is that, we have to be participating in the conversation, but it's also sort of our narrow sort of domain, so to say. It goes much broader and beyond, and some of the commentary in the chat is saying kind of exactly that, as Tony just mentioned. Chloe, let's go to you on this. Meg mentioned something really interesting, like privacy. Do we give it up? And we also have candidates that might say, you know what, I'm going to take personal action and delete myself online and so on. Immediately when I heard that, Meg, I just thought, you know what, that probably then becomes a red flag for an ATS that will then say, oh, it's a fraud risk because there's not a complete LinkedIn profile. Even if we as recruiters forget the AI, if you encountered a candidate that is a white collar worker that doesn't have a LinkedIn profile because of their undeclared privacy concerns, legitimate privacy concerns, wouldn't that be a red flag to you? Be honest. You'd probably think, hang on, what's going on there? I need to do further investigation. Or more likely, you just skip the candidate and go to someone else who is perceived to be less risk. So there's going to be a practical price for people paid for people with privacy conscious. If you start deleting yourself off these things, it's going to hurt you career-wise, which is a very uncomfortable sort of place to be. Chloe, confirm or deny my presumption. If there is a candidate that had no GitHub, no nothing, whatever, does that raise a flag on security?
Honestly, you can go either way on the fake candidates or the fraudulent one. Like that could be somebody who has a massively well-written LinkedIn profile, looks perfectly legit, and you just have to look for the teeny tiny red flags that are here. Or you can have a highly privacy conscious software engineer who has no digital footprint whatsoever. So I think we've seen that over the years. Like that's not something new. What I see as new and as a concern for recruitment and for hurting your career is recruiters bypassing candidates' resumes because, well, it looks like it's been written by an AI, so it's not a real person. When in reality, given the market, candidates have just asked ChatGPT or Gemini to write a CV or a resume that would be the best match for this particular role. So that bias on the recruiter side of things against AI is probably a bigger risk, I think, for hurting your career.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, to a certain extent, I deeply respect people that understand privacy and operate number of personal security measures and so on. It strikes me that that's the sort of mindset that might be quite useful to have in your employee population, actually, because they would be able to kind of spot a few things. I'm pretty permissive. I got to be honest. Firstly, I don't know. Mainly, I don't care, and thirdly, I haven't been like victimized of it yet. I mean, I'm sure my sort of sense of risk will accelerate when someone rips me off. But thank God that's not happened yet. And so I'm kind of complacent, I guess. I'm ignorant and complacent is probably how I'd best describe myself here. But yeah, hiring someone who's privacy conscious would be pretty good compliment. But how do we do that? Tommy, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to add that comment about someone without a visible online profile. I mean, we know in, for example, pre-employment checks that could harm a candidate going through that final phase of just verifying who they are and then their identity. And I know of candidates who have failed that process just because they don't have a registered address or sufficient employment or length of employment at past employers. So it is a factor. And then we know from our kind of consumer lives that not having a financial background or a footprint of credit cards and utility bills, etc., that can harm you on your credit score. So, it may well be a factor as processes kind of build out and we try to use more and more data to try to validate what we might know so that we have more informed, decision making. So that's just the point. But it's an interesting point that you're all talking about, and the lawful versus ethical is an interesting perspective as well. So we all know about compliance and GDPR compliance and so on. But I wonder what some of you might think about recruitment teams thinking about data dignity, and that's what you're really touching on. Not just ensuring we're legal, but being respectful of the candidate's data and their story, and then how we use it. Martin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's such a great point, Tommy. Data dignity. I love that phrase, and actually, it's a thought process that I've had for some time. And Hung will know this well. That I've been saying, for some time that the future EVPs will be around how responsible people are with your data and with your and with the AI they're using around that data. And this kind of conversation always takes me back to trust and whether a candidate trusts an organization with their data. And it always takes me back to a great story. 1994, Pizza Hut launched PizzaNet, which was one of the first kind of online ordering systems for pizza takeaway. And it failed spectacularly for one reason and one reason only. Consumers did not trust the system to put their credit card numbers in. And I think we're kind of seeing that, that happening now in recruitment, 30 years later, where we're going to start seeing candidates who actually don't trust recruiters with their data and start having, all of these lovely kind of agentic AI systems they're building without any form of security infrastructure or security layers in there. We're going to start seeing a failing of those systems. And it comes back down to, again, like you said, how are we managing people's data? Are we doing that ethically, responsibly, legally? Really, really interesting. Yeah, I love that take, Tommy. Love it.
Yeah. So then, interestingly, how should we convey this to the candidate who wants to know, right? Because everything you've just asked, how should recruiters present that?
I've always talked about a cookie policy as such on our careers pages. So obviously, if we wanted to, we have a cookie banner come up on our website. You click on it, you can see the types of cookies that are used, what they're used for, what data is being collected, how you opt out of it, et cetera, et cetera. And exactly the same thing we should be seeing on a careers page, which is an announcement that says, we do use technology. This is how we use it. This is the data we collect. This is what we do with it. This is how long we store it for. And this is what you need to do if you opt out. In much the same way that I think that the whole eightfold piece could be easily managed if we look at tools like Lucia, if we look at tools like Apollo, who do go out there and scrape people's data and create these kind of profiles on people for salespeople to contact. If you look in your spam folder, you've probably got an email from one of them saying, we've collected all your data. Here's all the data we've collected. This is where we got it from. This is the profile we've created for you. and here's how you opt out of us using it and sharing it with our customers. It's a simple solution, but whether or not people have the appetite to implement it, that's the question.
Yeah, give it the candidates the guidance makes sense. Go ahead.
Hang on, I mean, I can't believe Martin's stepping up and defending cookie banners here, though. I mean, that's just such a user experience crisis, though. I think it's really damaged the credibility of regulations. So I think it's really counterproductive. And I just think, you know what? If we flash up another banner to say, oh, by the way, do this, then we're just going to train people to say, yes, accept. And then you're going to have this casual acceptance of. And again, that just drives us down the wrong route, doesn't it? I mean, I don't know. What does anyone else think? Meg, your thoughts on this? Do we need another banner?
Yeah, no, and we've had this debate internally as well, not for the exact same topic, but around that option of, do you want to opt in, or should people be opting out? And is it something that should we automatically have it where they're opted out, and that banner should pop up and say, hey, we can, if you opt into this, X, Y, and Z will happen, rather than you have to figure out how to opt out of it. So my argument always is that people should be opting into things rather than opting out. But I'm a bit of a hippie that way. This is a huge question, though, just like not just at that early funnel stage either, though, but throughout the entire candidate journey. So thinking about things like if you're using assessment tools, and using things that it could impact candidate experience, but not only that, but could impact their results. I don't think we can name any names on this one, but there are some products where, medical issues could be in the way. So if they don't know how the AI is being used in a product, and they don't understand that, and that they don't have an opportunity with that clear notification and the ability to opt in or opt out of that in the process, could affect their outcomes unintentionally. And I think right now it's just, we're at a point where most people don't understand those processes. If they did, would there be more concerns raised by people using these products, which would eventually lead to kind of more of those lawsuits? But yeah, it is. I think that we really, I really like that term, Tommy, data dignity, and really thinking about, like, we're not just collecting data on all these clients or on all these customers, or, oh my goodness, what are they? Candidates. There we go. One of the 3 C's. That we're not just collecting data on these people, and that, it's really great because we can see some insights. I'm an analyst. I love data. I love data on great things, because you could really see a lot about your process, but giving people a chance to control that a lot more. And reflect that. I remember do you remember the arguments we used to have back in the day with Google? Google knew more about you than you did. And then was the opportunity. And I remember going into my Google, and I thought I was a man because of the types of things I was looking at, because I was into technology, and because of, and being a bit frustrated and being like, well, if you gave me the opportunity to have a conversation with you and say, this is who I am, and this is what I am interested in, is better than them spying on your data and trying to figure out what you're into and then labeling you that way. So I think maybe it's too many data scientists, too many of us analysts sitting away locked in rooms going, oh, we can collect data this way, rather than thinking about a more human approach to how we engage in these conversations, even if it's an online use case.
Weirdly, could AI solve this problem? Because a lot of it, I mean, my critique is purely on the UX side, right? I'm personally, as a consumer, annoyed at all of this stuff popping up, makes it unusable. I also think it creates a risk for people that are less, let's say, IT savvy. I call myself like complacent and ignorant, but I mean, let's say the older generation, suddenly they're encountering all kinds of decisions they need to make on a website. It's like they're just paralyzed on it. Like, they don't know what to accept because they can't see the gravity of it. I have a friend of mine whose mother basically can't operate a banking transaction because she's terrified of just saying yes to a pop-up banner. It's like a cookie banner, but she I have no clue what it is. She can't be expected to know what that is because this is totally new to her. So I think there's also a massive exclusionary part of this. However, what if we get an AI agent to step in and just talk to us, as you mentioned, Meg, that say, all right, here's the website. What do you reckon? And you literally talk to us. Yeah, actually, I don't mind, don't care. Or yes, it could actually have more of a dialogue rather than just slap you with like massive amounts of legalese. Is that the future? Chloe, your thoughts on that?
I'm terrified of AI agents since this morning. But like if we're just talking about one that's chatting with you, like a chatbot, basically a fancy chatbot, maybe not. I kind of feel like user experience kind of hits a wall very quickly with the chatbots, even when they're AI powered and they can have like conversation with you. If we're talking about an actual AI agent, then I'm terrified of it. I don't want them to get my data, my emails, nothing. So I want them out of my life since this morning. But
tell us what happened this morning, Chloe.
I learned about CloudBot, Cloud Havoc, and AI skills. So now that I've learned about that, I am terrified of agents and all they can do to our candidates' data. But yeah, I think from a candidate experience perspective, that's the thing that's going to be the trigger for everything. Like I agree with Megan on the opt-in. Like the GDPR is written as an opt-in, like everything should be opt-in, nothing should be opt-out. But I also agree that a lot of people don't know about all those things, and ignorance is 100% bliss. Like until this morning, I was perfectly happy working on AI agents, right? So I think it's more complicated than just a black or white solution. Like, it's not going to be that simple. And I don't have a good answer for you. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think I don't think anybody does have an answer, do they? It would all. Hopefully, we would get benefits simply by opening the dialogue on this and cracking through. So, a second thing I was going to sort of talk about here was this concept of like aggregated data. Like, how did the people aggregators get away with it? Basically is what I'm trying to say. So do you remember, rewind back 10 years ago, we suddenly had loads of sourcing was literally going onto the internet and retrieving data, right? So there's a bit of, potential permission not being given. But anyway, automation was simply just doing all of that. But doing it at scale. And suddenly we had the Entelos of this world, we had the social CVs, wonderful products actually from a recruiter point of view. You just type it in and suddenly you get this full profile of this candidate. Brilliant. But then the same problems come up. Like, does a third party have a right to aggregate someone's data and then present a number against it and say, oh, we think you're an 85% fit to this job, or, we think this is a strong candidate or not? I mean, how did those companies get away with it? Was it simply failure to enforce law consistently, or was there simply an argument that they made to say, actually, this is public data, therefore this person can't really have a comment, and in which case, is the eightfold case a nothing burger? Thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah, look, I think that we've always had this kind of arrogance in our industry that if it's public data, then it's fair game to collect it, to create a profile on it, and to score it and rank it. And I think that's where litigation is going to get in our way, and quite rightly so. I think if we go back to Eightfold, without it being all about them, what they've been doing is creating secret dossiers on people without their knowledge, and those people haven't even been applying for jobs. So we've got to draw the line somewhere and say, come on, you're creating this profile on me. I've not even applied for a job. You're selling that data to a potential future employer. You're not giving me the opportunity to make sure the data is accurate, the data is up to date. It could be based on a LinkedIn profile that I've not logged into for the last 3 years. So there are massive issues with it. I've always been anti that without some kind of trigger to that process, such as somebody has applied for a job, they've ticked a box to say, yep, you're okay to use all my profiles, here's all my links to my LinkedIn, my GitHub, Facebook, Reddit, whatever you want to kind of give them. So go for it. I think that's where, like I said, we've always had this kind of arrogance in the industry that if it's online, if it's in the public, then it's fair game to scrape it, collect it, create a profile on it and score it. And I don't think it is.
They did get away with it though, Martin. I mean, there's a decade's worth of businesses that literally had successfully created products, which I was actually a fan of, as literally, because I'm looking at it from two sides. As a person that's probably in the system as a candidate, I have no idea whether I was scored accurately or not, or whether I just didn't look at it. But as a user, they were super useful.
So that's not negating the fact that a human recruiter will absolutely go onto LinkedIn, find somebody's profile, look through it, see whether they're relevant. That's a totally and utterly different situation and different process. We're talking about, like you said, platforms that are using automation to go out and collect all this massive data and make decisions on it.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Meg? I mean, I guess there's two things here. Number one, the ethics of the practice, but secondly, practically, it seemed to just roll through. So, I mean, I've got the feeling right now that the practicality of it again is just going to roll through. So, what's your thoughts on those two issues? Ethics of data collection and aggregation of profile, and secondly, it just happens, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's so funny. I haven't heard the term aggregated data in so long. It made me laugh. But yeah, that was like the whole industry was, and I remember too back then. It was always like everyone had it was like 50 million profiles or something like that, or 500 million. It was the exact same number as LinkedIn. And it was like, I wonder where you scraped your data from. And there was a lawsuit as well. I'm trying to remember the outcomes of it, and it also applied to whether those discount airline sites, whether they could scrape from all the sites as well so that they could rank it, very similar. So like this concept isn't just in recruitment. This is a concept across many different applications on the internet, and whether we can scrape data or not. And we've done it lots. And there's that view if it's public data. But then at the same time, it's very easy to get passed into data that may not be public as well, which gets into the questionable. So there's the ethics of that. But I think the piece that I want to lean into is the ethics of the ranking and scoring, and really not explaining how they're ranked and score, or how the methodologies of it's been done. And I remember one product and they told us a little bit about how they were doing the scoring, but it was really on soft things, and it was about like whether the person would be a likely would likely change jobs or not. And then it's just like, okay, however you get to that score, the biggest thing is if it's right or wrong. Because you're giving a person who's looking at it a new piece of data that could be wrong. It's almost like lying to somebody then. And you go into some and I would go too deep into this altogether and goes into Kant's philosophy of truth telling and things like that. But as both on an ethical side, is it right if your prediction isn't very accurate, or the accuracy of it, is it right to be giving the prediction? And I think too, though, from a recruiter side, we should be asking the question, is that prediction actually giving me the information I need to make a better decision? Because at the end of the day, the whole point of all of this is to make better decisions, to improve that hiring decision, to make sure that we're getting the right person with the right skills for the job. And that's where I would say, like, from the products that I saw making those predictions in it, I didn't see one that I was like, wow, this is amazing. What I saw, what was amazing, was when they would break down and really understand what was matching, so that you could understand why this person was a strong candidate, not just a quick score that said like, gold star, silver star, something with no background to that information, or likely to leave or not likely to leave. So I think it kind of comes like, for me, my push would be for recruiters to really be thinking about like the ethics of making it, that's regulatory. I think we should really question that. But I think from a recruiter's perspective, you should be really asking the question, if I have a product that's giving me a piece of information, how reliable is that piece of information? And how much am I using that to base my decision upon?
Yeah, really interesting. Chloe, as someone who's kind of involved operating, setting up systems, and using tools of this type, how does all of the responsible AI piece and the discussions we've had so far translate into practical kind of usage? Because we're kind of like squeezed between the Scylla and Charybdis of two major forces here, aren't we? In the sense that, number one, we have all of these ethical concerns. We have to be, firstly, as human beings, we have to be concerned about it, but also as individuals that may be responsible for compliance risk, we have to be responsible, and infosec risk, we have to be responsible for it. But secondly, we also need to do more with less. We have to get on with the job. We have to recruit these people. Here's a tool that seems to help me do that. What do we do, Chloe?
Like, from a tools perspective, so far, for me, everything is a complete black box. And I am testing whatever new AI feature is being launched with a range of cases. So, for example, I was testing a scorecard summary feature, right? So I went with regular scorecards that were meh, not very well filled in. And then I made up scorecards that were very obviously biased, right? To test the feature and see what we were getting from all of those. And weirdly enough, and that was very disappointing at the time, was that the clearly biased scorecards were being surfaced as elements to discuss. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is not helping me as a recruiter if we're surfacing biased feedback as something to discuss. Like, clearly the biased interviewer will feel that they've done something right if it's being surfaced like that. So from a tools perspective, there's no real way of knowing. There's just experimentation. That takes a lot of time. You need to have plenty of use cases. And then once you have those use cases, then for me, I go to the legal team and I'm like, hey, what do you think about those things? Because based on the documentation, that should be unbiased. Like, it has passed the bias test that the tools need to do, at least in the state of New York, right? So it's very difficult to be like, yeah, sure, this is compliant from a tools side of things.
Does this lead us, though, to a point where we're so defensive that we end up simply saying no to everything, which, again, we're going to get hammered by it because the business is going to say, what the heck are you doing? Like right now, like CEOs are sitting there. No bigger enthusiasts for AI than CEOs, by the way. And they're looking at all the heads of function and they're saying, right, you're a laggard, you're a laggard, you're a laggard. And guess what? HR and TA are the most laggard of the lot. So the crushing pressure of that, I think, is going to cause us to make a shot on this. And then what do we do? Do we have practical guidance, Martin?
Look, I don't think we should be blanket saying no to systems. Like I said earlier on in the conversation, this is about testing assumptions, having good feedback loops. And so, set your baselines, in terms of performance of your AI systems, in terms of, bias, in terms of rank drift, in terms of scoring drift, and all those kind of things. Set your baseline and test against them. If there's one thing that I would suggest people go away and do, is take a CV, throw it through your system for, and it may not, we're not going to get into the whole, I don't have AI ranking systems, just throw it into a recruitment process. Find a CV, get it in there. It's your control, and then see what happens when it comes out the other side. Doesn't matter about black box versus glass box. Take that same CV, change the name, change the gender, change the religion, change the change the school, change the location, one thing at a time, and throw it through and see what the impact is on your system. And so if there's one thing people can do, it's just go in and do that. If you want to do it en masse at volume on a regular basis externally, come and talk to me. But at the same time, there's one thing people can do, just start setting your baselines on what we think is appropriate from a responsible and ethical perspective, and test those assumptions, continuously have that feedback loop.
Does Warden have that as a system? It strikes me as a product. If you can, you know what I mean? You have a product that literally does this, because
wider than that, but yeah, much wider than that.
I mean? I can totally get why this is useful to have a test data going in there, but I struggle to see enough recruiters having the time or bandwidth or the kind of skin in the game to go through process. Chloe, sorry, interrupted you. Go ahead.
No worries. I was just going to add that, the baseline that you said as well for whatever AI tool or feature you're using is how much is actually helping the recruiters, because that's going to weigh in your decision of, am I taking the risk that this is biased, this is surfacing things that are not very helpful, versus the time save and the general help in the process that it is providing.
And I think further to what Martin also said, though, if recruiters don't have time to do that or just don't know where to start, those are the questions they could ask of their existing suppliers. You could say, well, what happens if I do that? Is your system, your process, is it being validated against these biases for school, gender, name, religion, location, everything that Martin said? You can lean on your suppliers and ask them those difficult questions, make them squirm, right? Get them to tell you what they're doing, and ask them what's inside that black box as well.
I think that's something very interesting, and that we probably need from our vendors to provide us without asking, to really show us that kind of trail of experiments and at scale A/B testing of the system. And right now I haven't seen any of that, but that would be an amazing way to convince all the guardrails that, yeah, this is fine, tick, 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 if we could actually see it.
Yeah, is that the pathway to the future, Meg, where the vendors simply have to be more transparent with how they've got to the results? And does that actually get us to that sort of trade-off where, you know what, yeah, we've got to use the innovation, make use of it, but also, you know, do right by people, you know, make sure that we're not like creating systems that really are pejorative to different types of individual.
Yeah, I think it's well, really a three-part government regulation as well, but a two-part responsibility. Organizations need to be asking the tough questions that are going to force products and vendors to be transparent. They can't be satisfied with, you know, we have some machine learning magic in here. We have to get past that. Especially as this becomes democratized with things like vibe coding and agents and how quickly we can build things. We really need to be asking those tough questions. And that comes from having a well-established program internally. So if you have a really strong strategy, you have a really strong, not operating model, but HR governance process, or not HR governance, but AI and technology governance process, you have strong guardrails already built into the organization, then it forces teams to be compliant to them, which then forces people to ask those tough questions to vendors, which if they can't answer them, then it's a product you can't use. So I think it is like if organizations really lean into this, then it forces the vendors to do it. But right now people don't ask those tough questions. I know even with the work we do, I'm always surprised at how infrequently we get asked how we actually model things. You know, we'll get one question or we'll get one person who'll ask questions, and I'm more than happy to give them the information. We can respond to everything is because we have to, because of the environment that we operate in. We're highly regulated, so we have to be very transparent. But I can't get over how many people don't ask the questions. When I used to do, when we built the People Analytics Maturity Assessment, one of the big pieces in there was around ethics, and it was responsibility and having those guardrails in place. And it was rare for an organization to be concerned about their score. Most organizations was like, we got a score, it's somewhere in there, it's good. Didn't even really ask what it was made up of the score. They much more cared about their technology stack or their data issues or their structural issues or their investment issues. So I think it's one of those things. And where does that pressure come from for us to care about that?
Good point. Like this is why I think ethics is, I wouldn't say it's overrated, but it is kind of overrated because a lot of it is rhetorical. When it boil it down to the brass tacks, it's like the pressure and the incentives create the behavior, and the ethics might just create the guilt, basically. You know, you regret it after the fact, but the pressure causes you to do various things. Meg, Chloe, you had your finger up. Go ahead.
Yes, I had a question for Megan. So who in the company is responsible for asking those questions? Because I feel like myself as RecOps, I don't know that much. Same time last year, I was explaining to the legal team the difference between an AI and an algorithm. So who is equipped within the company to come up with the right questions to ask of our vendors?
Yeah, no, and that's a huge struggle that we see a lot of organizations facing is things like legal teams really don't understand the technology, is that leadership doesn't really understand the technology or the concerns. And we see this in all angles. You know, the CEO comes in one day and says, we're going to be using AI. And it's just like, okay, great. Like how, what, where, when, and they don't have that specific. So it is, it's a big can of worms, and I think organizations need to be taking this seriously sooner rather than when the regulations come, because it's building that strong foundation that's going to make you successful through this. But otherwise, you know, Martin, you said it earlier about like, you know, who's kind of in charge of the agents and if one goes wrong. And I always come up with like the Rick and Morty episode with the Mises, and that you just have, you know, a ton of these little Mises going like, who's responsible? Like I have my one task, I've done it. But like if one piece of bad data goes through that, how do you track it down? How do you manage for that? And if we don't have the foundations in place, we're setting ourselves up for really bad future problems, I think. I think it's the organizations that are going to do this well through this process that will be much more successful in the future, both in the sense of understanding the impact of AI, understanding how it's impacting people, making sure that they have the right people in the organizations, that they're hiring the right skills, all those pieces. and like having the right technology. We have lots of options there as well, but like having the right governance and ethics standards within the organization, I think is going to be one of those differences what we see in 5 years between organizations that are scrambling to fix problems and those that are being really successful.
Yeah, really good. I just want to check out poll results. We don't have a huge sample size, but let's have a quick glance at it. Does your company have an AI governance document? 45% said yes. 50% have said yes. We're boosting the numbers in real time. But then we've got like basically no, not planning to, and don't know, actually more than that at 50% as well. So, or just equivalent to, should I say. So we're kind of in a bit of a, in a bit of a mix at this point. I think basically no one knows what we're doing. We just have to keep talking about it. I also, we haven't even introduced the fact of the kind of the geopolitical angle, which I think does have an impact, because a lot of the sort of the differences between different legislative regimes are splintered across these geopolitical divides as well. And pretty soon you're going to get situations where people are saying, no, actually, I'm not having you sue my company. It's too important. Our business, our big tech businesses are too important for you to sue us. And then suddenly there's implications down the track on that. So anyway, maybe a round 2 needed for this, but we ran out of time, so we've got to leave everyone panting for more. So Martin, great to see you. We'll catch up with you later. We're doing another show, by the way, specifically on the A-fold issue. I think it's at 5 o'clock later today. So we'll be back on air for that. Chloe Morrison, great to see you. Wonderful to have your contribution. Meg Butler, great to see you back on the show after a long hiatus. So we'll have to make sure we bring you back for that as well. Tommy Lai, thank you so much also for being an excellent co-pilot for us. Why don't you take it away, Tommy? Where can people get hold of the Responsible AI document? Basically that's the question.
Yeah, so the report on responsible AI, you can find it in the chat here, right at the top, scroll right at the top. Hung shared at the start. I'll just post it in at the end as well. You can also find it on our website, olio.com. If anyone wants to hear about responsible AI and then how we validated our studies and make sure there's no adverse impact, tested on 100 organizations, thousands of mass testing, a glass box approach, happy to talk to you. So feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, that's about it, everyone. Thanks for watching. We'll be with you next time. See you.
Thank you all.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Hung.